Old man under a willow tree. In the late 1980s, a woman in Manchester, England, named Sadie, lost her husband under tragic circumstances. Her husband left her a large amount of money in his will, and Sadie and her 7-year-old daughter, Abigail, later moved to an old but beautiful cottage. The landlord asked her for a modest amount of rent on the cottage, which made Sadie wonder why the rent was so low on such a desirable country house. Sadie fell in love with her cottage's back garden, even though she always felt sad whenever she saw a willow tree in the middle of the garden and didn't know why. Only 3 months after she moved to the hut, her daughter came one night, excited, and said that she saw an old lady wearing a long black dress, and she was standing near the willow tree, and she waved to her while smiling. Then she disappeared. Sadie thought her daughter was sick, so she decided to spend the night with her, and she sat next to her reading a book while her daughter slept. Suddenly, she heard a knock on the door. Sadie worried a lot. "Who do you see visiting us at such a late hour?" "Abigail." Sadie opened the door and found in front of her a tall, gray-haired man looking at a piece of paper in his hand and in the other holding a bag. The man asked her, "Are you Mrs. Sadie?" After the examination, the doctor told her the need to take Abigail to the hospital. Sadie carried out the doctor's request and immediately took her daughter to the hospital, and there she discovered that her daughter had a fatal disease, but it could be cured. The child recovered and a long time had passed since that night, but Sadie did not forget about the doctor who came without anyone calling him. Many years later, in 1989 exactly, that is, 9 years after the accident of the unknown doctor, a handsome middle-aged man came to Sadie's hut and said that his car had run out of petrol and asked the widow if she could offer him some pounds so that he could from going to the nearest gas station and filling his car's tank. In return, the man left an expensive watch as a guarantee that he would return later to pay off his debt. Sade agreed. She gave the honest-looking man a small amount, but he seemed very grateful and went to the gas station with a can of petrol, then returned to his Ford Fiesta, which was parked in the driveway near Sadie's cottage. After he emptied the box in the tank of the car, he returned to Sadie's hut to tell her that he would bring her money as soon as possible. Despite Sadie's objection to returning the money, the man returned at 6 in the evening of the same day, carrying with him a bouquet of flowers that he gave to Sadie with her money, and kissed her hand and left. Sadie stopped him, because he had forgotten his watch, and she invited him to drink tea, so he agreed. During the tea drinking, a conversation took place that lasted until 9 between Sadie and the man who told her that his name was Tim, from Middlewich. The conversation ended with an exchange of phone numbers. 2 days later, Sadie called Tim's phone, but no one answered. I wondered if the guy had given her an invalid phone number just because he didn't want to embarrass her. She didn't know what was there, but she wished she could hear Tim's voice again. A few days later, the house phone rang and Abigail answered it and then called her mother because the call was hers. Sadie picked up the phone and said, "Hi." Tim wasn't what she expected. It was the voice of an old woman who said some terrifying things about Tim of Middlewich. She said he was a fraud who knew how much wealth she had inherited from her husband. Then I asked the caller for her identity, when the old woman said, "The owner of the hut will answer you." The following Sunday evening, Tim came to Sadie's cabin. This time, he brought more flowers and a bottle of wine. Sadie told him what the old woman said to her a few days ago. When Tim heard Sadie's words, he got up, took his coat, and left the house without saying a word. Sadie never saw him again, but she learned from the neighbors that his name was Shadi, who had spent 6 months in prison for fraud. It was also rumored that he had 2 wives, one in Crewe and the other in Chester. He also currently lives with his girlfriend in Middlewich. A few days after the call, Sadie visited the owner of the hut, and she told him about the old lady with whom she made a strange phone call, in which she told her intelligence information and said that the owner knew her identity. Once she saw the ghost of an old woman. She also said that she received warning calls from an old woman many times and late at night. The owner said that at first he thought it was all just stories, exaggerations and excuses to leave without paying the rent. Sadie promises the owner that she will not leave the place because she considers the old man's ghost useful and harmless. The owner felt relieved after a sadistic promise to him and began to tell her the truth about the ghost, saying that the old woman named Enid had died in the hut 5 years ago. She had lived in the hut for about 20 years alone. One afternoon she was found dead under a willow tree in the garden. Within months, according to the cottage's new tenants, the ghost of an elderly woman was seen crossing the lawn in the back garden on a moonlit night. The landlord admitted that he had also spotted Enid one winter's evening wandering around the snow-covered garden, but when he went to investigate he did not find her, nor were there any footprints in the snow.